What a college football season it has been, and something tells me that the best is yet to come. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Looking forward to Week 8. We look back at Week 7 as well. We got Matt Zemek along for the ride here on a Monday night. You can catch Matt's work, of course. Trojans Wire. USC with a huge win on Saturday night. A dominant performance by the Trojans. We will delve into that. Catch Matt again and the rest of the crew there at Trojans Wire. Matt's work here at the Voice of College Football, USC, throughout the week as well. Matt, good to see you.
Great to see you. You know, let's just stop and pause for a moment. 10 years ago in college football, like we would start every season thinking it's Alabama and it's Clemson. And there's not really too much competition for Saban and Dabo. And we are in a completely different universe. We have done a complete 180 from, Alabama, Clemson. Like for 4 years, it was just Alabama, Clemson, and then, Joe Burrow, LSU has that 1 year, but and still through 2021, 2022, Alabama, then Kirby and Georgia replaced Dabo and Clemson. But it was a 7 or 8 year period in which you knew that at least one and likely two schools were going to be right at the end in the semis and or final. And what a dramatic change in our sport these past few years. I mean, could anyone have predicted it? I mean, I'm sure there were some people who said that NIL and the portal were going to really stir things up. But to this extent, this radically, this completely, I marvel at just how different the sport is. And may I say, for the better. So much variety, so much parity, so much uncertainty. You have the Indiana Hoosiers legitimately a top 3 team in the United States, a near lock for the Big Ten championship game and the playoff in the middle of October. It's not even Halloween yet. What a new day it is for the sport of college football.
Matt, I'll size it up this way because it hit me a couple of years ago, and then I looked back at the 14 college football playoff era. Think about it this way. After Oregon beat Florida State in the Rose Bowl, which was the very first night of the college football playoff, after that, up until the very final playoff, no one won any playoff games except the SEC, Clemson, and Ohio State. That's it. All the playoff games were won by those 3 components.
That's right. It was just this very narrow subset, and now it's the opposite of narrow. And we have James Franklin fired after losing to UCLA and Northwestern in consecutive weeks. The other really, really, really big story.
Now, what I'm curious to see, Matt, as we get toward championship weekend and then obviously into the playoff, is if this becomes truly a free-for-all or this becomes something close to what the NCAA men's basketball tournament typically is, where there's all this chaos and excitement and all this that goes on the first couple rounds, and then the heavyweights still take control when it really matters, and we get a 1, 2, 2, 4 Final Four, something in that realm where the lockdown occurs, but it's a whole lot of fun to get to that point. But, the powers that be take control in the semifinals, let's say.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that, Mark, because we just had 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four, but it's not as though they were traditional powers. Florida, Auburn, and Houston joining, so Duke was the blue blood, but you had 3 non-traditional powers as 1 seeds. So that's the comparison with Indiana, being a higher end team. It's not as though you might see lower seeds win in the playoffs, but we're seeing non-traditional teams go to the high seeds. And Miami is kind of its own unique story. If they ever figured it out down there, they would obviously be a force to be reckoned with. But Miami's been away from this kind of stage, this kind of centrality in the sport for most of the past 2 decades. There was 2017 under Mark Richt. Miami had a really good year that year, but generally, for the better part of the past 20 years, Miami's been off the stage. And so now Miami's coming back to the stage. So, you had, as you said, Ohio State, Clemson, SEC. Like, there are some really good top tier teams, but they don't have the labels on the soup can that we're used to seeing. And so that's another part of it. So, like, it's not as though the underdogs are necessarily the lower seeds, right? Because Ohio State was a number 8 seed, but we all know that was the most talented team last season. And of course, there was the quirk with, having Boise State seeded 3rd. We all knew Boise State was not a top 4 team. That's no disrespect to Boise State. It's just that, they never should have had the top 4 seeds going to conference champions. It should be the 4 best teams, as we're going to have this year. So, last year was weird in that you had Boise State as a 3, you had Arizona State as a 4 seed, and we knew that higher seeds really didn't translate to being the better teams. But this year, you could have Miami as like a 2 seed, Indiana as a 3 seed, and it's going to be interesting how you and I, how fans, how the public treats a 2nd seeded Miami, treats a 3rd seeded Indiana. Are they going to be treated like underdogs, or are they going to be seen as the better teams? And then, of course, are they going to prove themselves to be the better team? So it's really interesting that you mentioned the comparison with basketball, because last year was a year for heavyweights, but they were non-traditional names on the jersey. And you really have some parallels in college football with Miami and Indiana.
So we'll get to 2 things here real quick. Couple things we need to clean up before we go to our first call of the night. Number 1 is displayed on your screen. 2 of your favorite brands come together here, the voice of college football and your favorite team. So what you're looking at right there is vocfb.com. Go to the shop item there at the top of the screen, and you can shop for VOCFB items there, the voice of college football, with polos and tees and hats and the like. And then you can also search for your favorite team. Let's say it's Alabama. And again, 2 different types of hats and t-shirts and polos. You got the koozies, the mugs, and the tumblers there for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We've got about 25 teams to choose from. So the voice of college football merging with your favorite college football team. So check it out. We have ensured that you are getting quality at the best price possible. And also keep in mind that I understand it's a bit cumbersome to get on over here at SG1 Sports on Monday night, but it's part of the master plan. So just bear with us here. And I should do a better job of promoting that Monday nights are here on SG1 Sports at the voice of college football. So that's just on Monday. And again, it's part of a master plan, or maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, a plan of sorts. So there you go. All right, let's get to our first caller of the night. We got David Greenshield on the line. David, how you doing?
Gentlemen, how are you? What a busy weekend of college football we had this weekend, gentlemen. Matt, I'm so glad you're here tonight. I was going to broach a couple of topics with you. First of all, I just want to say my first full year of watching college football was actually, interesting enough, 1986. I'm going to date myself a little bit here. And I always said that I watched 3 bowl games that year. I watched Ohio State beat the tar out of Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl. Mark used to cover Jackie Sherrill back in his SEC days, and he coached that A&M team, and they won the old Southwestern Conference. And Ohio State and Coach Bruce went down to the Cotton Bowl and slapped them around a little bit. And after a very devastating loss, still one of the most devastating losses in the game in my life, Matt France is still going to make that field goal. And then I watched the Rose Bowl. Of course, that's the one time John Cooper could beat the team up north. He beat him in the Rose Bowl that year because Bo don't know roses. 2-8, by the way. Yep. And then I watched the national championship game that night, which was the Penn State-Miami game, which, was interesting. Joe Paterno's second national title. And I've never said this. There for a period of time, Penn State was actually my second favorite team after Ohio State. Actually, until they joined the Big Ten. Then I had to cut ties. Once they joined the Big Ten, I cut ties, which I think makes sense. And Mark's always had a soft spot. He likes Ohio quarterbacks that go to Penn State. So that's his
actually, you're on it there, David, because I have traditionally had a soft spot for Penn State pretty much at the same time that you did prior to them joining the Big Ten. Yeah. I would say I kind of leaned Penn State's direction in big games.
So let's get into it. Matt, I've got a question for you. Mark, maybe you can answer this as well.
Do I get to answer it as well?
Well, go. I'm putting it out to the powers that be here, gentlemen. Okay. I had heard rumors. Was it to start the 2021 season? Wasn't James Franklin rumored to take the USC job at one time? Weren't those rumors being floated out there before Lincoln Riley took the job, that he was rumored to take that job? If you guys want to take that and run with it, I haven't heard you guys address that in the past. I don't know if you guys have some thoughts on that.
Well, like my first really big show with Mark Rogers was the Lincoln Riley hiring day. I remember we did like 90 minutes, maybe even 2 hours on that Sunday afternoon in late November of 2021. Like that was kind of our big first splashy kind of moment together. So kind of a special place in my heart and my memory there. Mm-hmm. That coaching search, you remember, Clay Helton got fired like 2 or 3 weeks in the season, a lot like Deshaun Foster in UCLA. It was a mid-September firing. And so USC had, 2.5 months to line this thing up. And there was a James Franklin stage. There was a Luke Fickell stage. And then on Thanksgiving weekend, if you remember all the details, there was the Lincoln Riley LSU smoke screen. I mean, it turned out to be a smoke screen, but there were the hot and heavy Lincoln Riley LSU rumors. And Iowa State played TCU on Thanksgiving Friday. Might seem like an innocuous detail, but it simply meant Iowa State got to finish its game on Friday before a bunch of other teams finished their regular seasons on Saturday. So that was supposed to give Matt Campbell like a 24-hour head start on the USC job if he wanted it. And John Wilner, you know, the guy who broke the USC UCLA to the Big Ten story in 2022, you know, one of the better reporters. You can debate his AP poll vote all you want, but like he's a superb reporter. Like no one questions his reporting chops. Yep. He was saying, you know, USC and Matt Campbell are coming closer together. He never said done deal, but like it looked like Matt Campbell on that Friday evening of Thanksgiving weekend in 2021. And then, you know, it turned out that Lincoln Riley's agent, I believe Trace Armstrong, was, you know, floated out the LSU trial.
Trace Armstrong, there's a name.
Underneath, he was making that road to USC. Mike Bone and his lieutenant Brandon Sosna had it all lined up, and they were praying for Oklahoma State to win Bedlam, because that meant Oklahoma wouldn't go to the Big 12 championship game, and that would free up USC to have the interview with Lincoln Riley. Oklahoma State wins Bedlam, and then overnight, that midnight escape to Los Angeles occurred. So James Franklin was part of that story. It was hot and heavy in the middle of that autumn, but there were, you know, 2 months for that drama to unfold. USC didn't have to make a decision in September or October or even early November. Waited until the Sunday of that Thanksgiving weekend. So yeah, it's fascinating to contemplate a world in which either James Franklin or Luke Fickell go to USC. Remember, Luke Fickell worked under Mike Bone at Cincinnati. So Mike Bone relocated to USC as athletic director. So it was felt that would be a natural fit. And yet here Franklin is unemployed and Luke Fickell soon to be unemployed at Wisconsin. But it's not as though USC's hit it out of the park with Lincoln Riley. It's just fascinating to see all these twists of history.
Okay. Mark, did you have a thought, Mark?
Well, David, I guess your intuition was correct because Matt was the guy to answer that question. Uh,
Okay.
I can pretty much coincide with about 90% of that because I do recall it as he took us down the timeline, but I could not have expressed it any better than Matt for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I always wondered, isn't it crazy how history could have changed? That's one of the great what ifs. The ultimate what if is if Rich Rod takes the Alabama job. That would have been that's the one that's the sea change of history of college football. Is if Rich Rod takes the Alabama job. That's always the biggest what if ever. And
Well,
that was
if
close. And that
we're
was
gonna do
close.
if we're going to do historical what ifs, what if Joe
Yeah.
Paterno takes the New England Patriots job in the 1970s?
He was rumored to take NFL jobs. I had heard that. Like I remember he
He
did an interview.
accepted the offer. He slept on it. He got up the next morning and he said, "You know what? Actually, no."
Right. Yeah. All right. So let's get into Penn State as a hierarchy in a job here, gentlemen. Um, Mark does a hierarchy. I think every year you used to do it of like ranking the programs and where you see them and how they fit into college football.
Absolutely.
I see Penn State still in the 10 to 15 range as far as programs. If they're top 10, I think they're about 10. Okay. I actually thought, Matt, that if he went to SC, he was upgrading because I think USC is a top 5 job. I've said that before. I think it's capable of being a top 5 job. Now, is it quite the job that it was during the Carroll era? Now, Carroll actually improved it a lot, and brought it up. But I still think USC with its resources can be a top 5 job. I think Penn State is a top 10 job. I would say right at 10. And I think you are capable of winning there. The state of Pennsylvania still has talent. You still have talent within the East Coast area. You've also proven that you can win games there. I mean, Franklin winning 10 games was really good. I still wonder what Bill O'Brien would have done there, by the way. If Bill O'Brien never goes to the Patriots, I've always said that's a what if there too. That if O'Brien would have kept that job, how good of a job would he have done over that period of time? Because I think he saddled him with Christian Hackenberg those first couple years, and that wasn't his type of quarterback. And then I think, once he turned the corner a little bit in 16 and he got McSorley, and then he got Joe Moorhead to run his offense, he had his
Talking
best
about Franklin here.
Yeah, Franklin. Yes. Then he had his best teams. I still say to this day, his 2017 team with McSorley and Barkley, his best player, was his best team. And one of the great what ifs is we came back from 15 points down to beat him in Columbus.
18.
Well, it was 15 in the fourth quarter. That's right. We were down 35 to 20 in the fourth quarter. And we blocked a punt that totally flipped that game around. And JT Barrett had one of the 2 greatest games of his life. The game at Sparty in 14 is probably 1-2 with that game as far as big games. And if that fourth quarter goes the other way, I'm firmly convinced that team wins the Big Ten and makes the playoff that year. So that's also a game that cost him. Franklin's got about 3 or 4 games. Mark used to tell me that if John Cooper could have flipped 2 or 3 games in his history at Ohio State, how much different his history would have been in Columbus. Franklin's in the same boat. If you flip, and I'm getting to this, if you flip that game, and I tell you the other game that's probably hurt him. Well, the last 2 years I would pick the games. If he sits on the ball against Notre Dame and goes to overtime, they maybe pull that out. Now, Aller threw a terrible pick. See, Aller's terrible picks have probably, you hate to say this, may have cost Franklin his job. Because they would have been playing for a national championship last year. And me and Mark agree. I thought they outplayed Notre Dame for large portions of that game. They really did. And on top of that, basically, you know what? Joel Klatt had a great line. Oregon basically allowed Penn State to lose, maybe he said 2 games in a row. They may have allowed Penn State to lose 3 games in a row because that game got in their head. And there's that, what there is in college football, guys? There are these games you lose where it starts a spiral. And that's exactly what happened this season, in my view. You guys' thoughts?
Well, David, I'll say, first of all, that I just don't spitball those rankings. So there's a lot of data that goes into this. So, yeah, I keep track of all this business, all sorts of categories. So,
I know you
absolutely.
do.
So, yeah, Penn State, when you're talking about a top 10 to 15 job in the country, you're talking about right this second.
Okay.
Are you?
I would say I don't know if I can name 15 better jobs in the country better than Penn State.
Yeah. And your assessment of James Franklin, I think, is spot on. My assessment is that he is the Mark Richt of the Big Ten of his era.
Good comparison.
Although he had more opportunity than Mark Richt. So Mark Richt's pathway to championships was much more difficult.
Because of Saban and
no. Yeah, I'm just talking about the logistics of the championship structure.
BCS and then 4-team playoff.
That's right.
And Richt only had one season of a 4-team playoff, and that was right at the end of his tenure at Georgia. So he didn't even really get a shot at the 4-team playoff. He would have been making 4-team playoffs fairly regularly. He would have made, I've done the count, whatever it is, 5 or 6 of those. A 12-team playoff, obviously, he would have been there 3/4 of his stay at Georgia, but he finished in the top 10 8 times in 15 years. So I think Mark Richt had a slightly better, he did not have the horrific performance against top 5 and top 10 teams and ranked teams at Georgia that James Franklin, but it was pretty much the same narrative. Always lost the wrong game, couldn't quite get to the mountaintop, consistently winning at a high rate at a school where there is expectation to win big. And if you want to put the Georgia decision on one end of the spectrum and you want to take Wisconsin at the other end of the spectrum, and I know that Wisconsin has not been playing at championship level, but they were consistent as a winner, obviously, once Barry Alvarez took over. So both of them made a change when their head coach was performing at acceptable rates. Paul Chryst is going to Big Ten championship games. He's going 10-2, 9-3, but they looked and saw this is a changing landscape in the Big Ten. We've got 4 newcomers from the West Coast. Our recruiting is not what it was. We're not quite as good, even though they were coming off a 9-4 season. There was complacency had set in. So they make the big change. They make the big splash. It's Luke Fickell. It doesn't work out. Obviously, for Georgia, I don't have to explain. They go from a top 5 or 6 coach in the country. They take a gamble, and they get arguably the best coach in the country over the next 10 years.
Right. And, by the way, Richt had that game, by the way, the de facto national championship game of 2012. If he gets 3 yards in the Georgia Dome, they boat race. You've said it, Mark. We agree. They boat race Notre Dame for the title that year. And, Richt got off to a good start, too. He won 2 SEC titles from 2002 to 2005. I still think his 07 team with Stafford was as good as any team in the country, by the way. So his first 6 to 7 years there were really, really good. Then he had a lull. And then he had that 12 team. And then the 12 team was his last shot. And then that team kind of, declined and they made the decision. It's interesting with the Penn State thing. I do think it's a solid program. I do think you can win there, but the Big Ten's a lot better than when James Franklin took it over too. So I think I would put that component into it, with the conversion of the conferences. So you do have to weigh that into it. I think I do wonder what type of coach they get. Do they go to the pros? Do they look at like a program builder? I don't know what they're saying though is Cignetti. Indiana's got the resources to keep Cignetti. You'd think that Cignetti would be the logical choice. All right, well, here's one. Is Cignetti more likely, if he leaves Indiana, to take one of the Florida jobs or to take the Penn State job?
Okay, well, we'll say so. A lot of layers to peel away here, and I think the first layer is that, to me, if I'm Curt Cignetti, all right, I've gone to a place that's been, tumbleweeds, just totally barren in terms of football achievement, and I have it number 3 in the country. I'm going to be in the playoff back-to-back years. Like, I am the god of Bloomington, especially since Indiana basketball is not making Final Fours.
Right.
Why would you leave this situation if you're Curt Cignetti? You're already in the top tier of college football. Why do you start from the beginning at another place where there's more pressure, there's more scrutiny? Like, Cignetti has already done more than any Indiana coach in history. Like, he's already exceeded John Pont from 1967.
Wow.
So like he's already the king of Bloomington. Like, he has free meals and drinks for life, just based on what he's done to this point in 1.5 seasons. So like, he has security, he has eternal goodwill. Why do you then go to the meat grinder of Happy Valley and, all the dark negative history, with Joe Pa and the unraveling there, and this program desperate for redemption, paying James Franklin nearly $50 million to find the savior. Why would you walk into that death trap? And I'm not trying to be negative toward Penn State. I'm just looking at this from Curt Cignetti's point of view. Like, Indiana, you're on a pedestal for life. Like, nothing's going to undo all the amazing work that you've done. So why do you start from scratch at another place where the microscope and the media coverage are going to be so much more intense? I don't see Curt Cignetti leaving Indiana. All right, so nailing down that point.
Okay.
But now, if we're to engage in that hypothetical, I think he would choose Penn State. Like, Big Ten,
okay,
I think fits Cignetti's style. I mean, you look at Indiana, Oregon. Let's talk about that game.
So when you get to that.
Indiana was able to play that game in a phone booth. It was not vertical shots. It was not stretching the field vertically north-south. It was 5-yard passes, 7-yard passes, working the flats. When Indiana tried to push the ball downfield, that's when Mendoza threw the pick six. Just keeping everything short, grinding out first downs, using up the clock, preventing Dante Moore and Oregon from getting on the field for too many snaps. Indiana was able to shrink this game on every possible level, shrinking the size of the field so that Oregon's speed was negated or at least minimized, shrinking the length of time in the game. So that kind of style, that translates a lot more to Penn State in my mind, than to a Southern team. But now let's hit on something that you didn't get to. I'm going to just inject it into the conversation. How does Penn State go about this? I think if you're Penn State, you force Cignetti to say no. That's where it starts. There are certain candidates you're not likely to get them, and I don't think Penn State's likely to get Cignetti, only because I think he's staying in Bloomington. But you have to make Cignetti say no. You have to court him. You have to make
Godfather offer kind of thing.
Yeah, you have to have the 12 roses and just all the fine touches, and you have to get on your knees and beg and make him say no. That's where it starts. But if Cignetti does turn it down, as I think he will, then this gets really interesting, and it goes to the point of, okay, you fired James Franklin, who, for all his flaws, and there are plenty of them, he won 10 games a year. Like, he did that with machine-like regularity. So if you're going to fire James Franklin, are you really going to replace him with Matt Rule? Like, that's not a clear upgrade. I mean, we could say it's the same tier or level of coach, but it's not a clear-cut upgrade. And so that's where it's going to get really sticky for Penn State. And, I haven't heard a few names mentioned that I think Penn State needs to consider. You have to be realistic if you're an athletic director. You have to know that your ultimate candidate might turn you down.
Yeah.
It's really that second choice, that third choice, which really shows how good an athletic director really is. Like, do you have the best realistic plan in place? Not your best ideal plan, but your best realistic plan. And a name that no one's talked about, and I'm not even sure he's likely to leave for Penn State, but Jeff Brom.
Really?
Jeff Brom,
not a bad name.
Brom, he's an elite play designer. He really offers something extra that I don't think Matt Campbell has, that I don't think Matt Rule has. And you give Jeff Brom the resources of Penn State, you give Jeff Brom the opportunity to land the best quarterbacks in the transfer portal. And with Penn State's resources and infrastructure, you get a decent to really good defense, national championship formula right there. And no one's been mentioning him. And yes, Jeff Brom loves being at Louisville. I get that. I know that. But
that's a step up.
If Signetti says no, then you go to that next step down. Jeff Brom, to me, if I'm Penn State's AD, I go all out at Jeff Brom with everything I have.
Jeff Brom. That's an interesting. See, I think Brom would be a good hire. I think he's kind of low key, that play designer, maybe quarterback whisperer type. If he's the type of guy that can come in, develop the offense, he better hire the right DC, of course. Kind of like what we talk about with Day and Lincoln Riley. They better hire the right DC to get the other side of the ball right. But if they do that, then he could be solid. He could be under the radar.
And you're not getting a young pup. You're not getting someone who's unproven, and let's just vet Matt Campbell for a little bit.
Bloom is off that rose, I think.
The air's kind of going out of the balloon at Iowa State. And also let's remember that he maxed out at Iowa State during COVID, which was all scrambled. That did kind of distort things a little bit. Like, I'd like to see Matt Campbell go to a mid-tier Big Ten or SEC program and nail it there before you hand him the keys to a job as good as Penn State. Now, some might say Jeff Brom's in a similar category. Remember, he got Louisville to the ACC championship game. He's done a little bit more climbing under a little bit more difficult circumstances. And that Louisville team that went to the ACC championship game, the quarterback was Jack Plummer. Right. He was a mediocre quarterback from Cal. You give Jeff Brom Whole Foods level groceries. Bill Parcells talking about, give me the groceries, I'll do the cooking. You give Jeff Brom Penn State Whole Foods premium groceries from the farmer's market. I have very little doubt he can get Penn State right to the top, and he's going to be able to design plays at a level that Penn State has generally not had, with the exception of the guy you mentioned, Joe Moorhead. In 16 and 17. Yeah. And Penn State really needs cutting edge on offense. That's like the extra ingredient to go up against Ohio State's bone-crushing defense every year. Yeah. To me, I think Jeff Brom really checks a lot of boxes, and it's really interesting that no one has mentioned him yet.
I think that's a good name. I did want to get to Indiana and USC real quick if I can, guys. I have to say, you mentioned about Signetti. I could make a case right now, and I said that if Signetti went 8-4, 9-3 this year, I thought that would be really solid. If you go 11-1 at Indiana and then go 8-4, 9-3, well, forget that. I mean, this what he's done with the portal. By the way, I think what we're looking at with Signetti could be up there with a Bill Snyder, maybe even a Bobby Bowden as far as transformational. I know Mark holds a Bill Snyder in a high regard with what he did at Kansas State all those years. I am putting Signetti in that kind of category, guys, because his ability to work the portal this year, they've upgraded the offensive line. They've upgraded at quarterback. And I tell you, and you were talking about this a second ago, Matt, they've upgraded that front seven on defense. That front seven on defense was all over Mendoza in the second half. They were getting in his face, getting pressure, forcing him to get rid of the ball. What he has done through just working the portal and upgrading this roster is amazing to me. And, to me right now, this is one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country. It's got to be. Thoughts?
Well, my thought would be that I agree with you. All the evidence is right there. Demolishing Illinois, which is not a great football team, but it's a top 25-ish football team, and to beat them by 8 touchdowns. And then this Oregon effort was just remarkable at Autzen Stadium, 10-point win, and a legitimate 10-point win. They were clearly the better team.
Yes.
And like you say, their front seven just dominated the game. From the very first snap, they threw Dante Moore down for a loss, and they were all over him. 6 sacks. It was a remarkable performance. So, yeah, obviously history tells us that Bill Snyder and Bobby Bowden, they sustained that. Yes. That is the only question to be to be answered here. But in terms of elevation from the abyss of college football to championship level play, it would even surpass Bill Snyder, because of course he didn't get to the point where really Kansas State was legitimately in play for national championships, even though
98, Mark. 98.
I know.
98. Yeah.
You know, if in this new era, if Indiana becomes another player in the Big Ten consistently, yeah, I think after what we saw last year, we were all impressed with Kurt Cignetti and thinking, okay, Indiana could go like 8-4 every year. Man, this would be remarkable if he continues this and they go 8-4 every year, because we looked at last year's team like an 8-4 team, because they kind of were. But for him to take the next step, I don't know how to properly evaluate the talent on this team. And I was asked this last night. And I went into it because in the past, we've been able to just look at recruiting rankings. And I know that they're flawed, but in mass, they're very accurate. And we could look to see, okay, Penn State's roster is comprised of the number 7, 12, 5, and 8 recruiting classes of the last 4 years. And they're playing Ohio State.
That's right.
And there's our number 2, 6, 3, and 2. There you go. But with the transfer portal, you're looking at very accomplished players that have achieved something, and they're basically grown men compared to 17-year-old athletes. And so that's what he's been able to add to this. So I don't know that Indiana's not as talented as Oregon. They're not supposed to be, and the recruiting rankings say that they're not, but
well, Oregon did lose a fair amount of talent off last year's team, too. You know what I mean? And that may have showed up also on Saturday. They lost, I believe, their offensive tackles. They lost Gabriel, Jordan James at running back, Tez Johnson. They did lose a fair amount, you know.
And I filled up my Sunday afternoon watching Dylan Gabriel throw 5-yard passes in the flat all day, 52 times.
Don't big up the Browns, Mark. Please, you're trying to ruin my day here.
I watched the Browns for the first time this year. Watched the whole game.
Geez, you rake some leaves or something, Mark. Find something better to do with your time, I think, man. But yeah, I think Cignetti, he's just worked the portal. You know, he brought in some of those James Madison guys a few years ago. I think Surratt at wide receiver is an NFL wide receiver. Hemby's a solid back. We kind of saw that a little bit at Maryland. He was a solid back, not a great back, but a solid back. I think the legit upgrades on the offensive line and the front 7 are where this team is a lot better than they were a year ago. The trench play. So
I'm going to speak blasphemy, but I kind of iterated this to a certain extent on Saturday night after watching Chaz Surratt and Mekhi Lemon. Is Jeremiah Smith the best wide receiver in the country? Like, if we didn't know the names and what was supposed to be the facts.
I mean, I still think from physical tools and skills, he is the best wide receiver in the country. I do.
Those other guys are producing better than he is. And I know that he doesn't control that. It's the most, I say this all the time and I can't think of the word. It's the position that's the most dependent on the field, wide receiver, of other positions. So I get that. But has Jeremiah Smith made one catch that anybody has talked about or put on a highlight reel or anything this year?
He's had a few nice catches. I mean, the thing about it is they've spread the ball out a little bit more this year. Tate's having a really nice year there too, Mark. You know, so, and they've incorporated the tight ends a little bit. And you know, I have no problems with the Ohio State passing game as it is right now. I really don't. I mean, the quarterback's accurate. He makes good decisions. He's not turning the ball over. And if you give me an accurate quarterback that makes good decisions, which Julian Sain is, I mean, he checks both those boxes. That's not all bad. The one thing with Ohio State, I would say, is they need a little bit better running game. They need to improve their running game.
Absolutely, they do. Yeah, I was not taking a shot at the Ohio State passing game, and I was not taking a shot at Jeremiah Smith. He's remarkable. I'm just saying, if we call it as it is, as we watch it, it's almost like the top 25 that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
If we don't know who Jeremiah Smith is supposed to be, if we just watch the games, is he playing like an All-America wide receiver? No.
Are you just saying that because he's not putting up the stats, Mark, right?
He's not putting up the stats, and I'm not seeing him make a catch this entire season that there's not 50 other wide receivers in the country that aren't catching the ball that's hitting him right in the face mask. Like,
Well, okay.
and that's not his fault. He
Right.
can't say, saying throw it bad and I'm going to leap up and snare it. But when you see CJ Daniels at Miami and some of the catches that he's making, and again, Mekhi Lemon, some of the catches that guy's pulling down, and he's got other playmakers to have to spread the ball around too as well.
And Mekhi Lemon beat Michigan, so he can't be all bad, right?
Yes, I did want to get to that, Matt. I was going to throw your team some flowers this weekend. Colin
Not
Coward,
roses, unfortunately.
well, not roses, unfortunately. I will say this: Lincoln Riley put poor Wink Martindale in a blender on Saturday because. I think some of the play design and the way they worked against that blitz, because they were blitzing a lot, and the way they worked the middle of the field with the tight end and some of that. First of all, that game should have been a lot worse than it was. Had you guys not had 2 turnovers, that score would have been a lot more lopsided than it was. I think
let's have a Michigan conversation. Let's have a Sharon Moore conversation. I follow plenty of Michigan fans on social media. Like, they are fed up. They think he's in over his head. They think he was handed this job. He didn't earn it. And like, this is not training time. Michigan's not a job where you get your training wheels. There's kind of a Lane Kiffin USC element to all of this, right? That Lane Kiffin got all these plum jobs before he really spent his time in the salt mines. He went to the Nick Saban rehabilitation facility in Tuscaloosa.
Yes.
He goes to the Group of 5, leads a program, Florida Atlantic. He finally paid his dues. And on the back end of that, he finally became a mature, grown-up head coach. And he's done some really solid work at Ole Miss. So it's really very similar in my mind with Sharon Moore. He needs to go get himself a Group of 5 job, learn how to be a leader of a program, build up a resume, and then on the back end of that, maybe he then comes back. I remember having this conversation with just, talking sports as I do. I've done it for a long time.
Yeah.
Like a decade ago. Remember when Luke Walton got the Laker job?
Yes.
He was so young. Like,
right.
It was his dream job, but he was young. What in his career prepared him for that? Just sitting at Steve Kerr's side as a Warriors assistant. Okay, he learned something, but you need to go through your paces. You need to learn how to be the big chief.
Pat Riley, Phil Jackson,
Yeah. So, Luke Walton needed to realize, okay, the Lakers might be my dream job, but am I fully ready for that dream job? It's going to be there 10 years later. It's going to be there 15 years later when I'm fully ready to own this and master it. You don't have to take your dream job the first chance you get. You take your dream job when you are ready. And that, to me, is Sharon Moore with Michigan right now. When Lincoln Riley's your get right game, that should be a bit of an eye opener. And when USC, which has been a soft team for most of the past 2 years, just absolutely kicks your butt up and down.
It was bad
on the field physically. with USC was missing 2 starters on its offensive line. USC was missing its 2 top running backs. One's out for the year. One's out 4 to 6 weeks. Like, this was a badly shorthanded USC offense without a lot of its ones from opening day. And they still dog walked Michigan. Like, that tells me all I need to know about Sharon Moore. So really, Michigan needs to be having some very serious conversations behind the scenes right now. It's not just Luke Fickell. It's not just Jonathan Smith. Sharon Moore should be on the hot seat at Michigan.
Well, listen, I have some masochistic tendencies, so I will go on Mark Rogers' largest fan base show from time to time and take a listen every now and then. Mark has those same tendencies because he's on with Mr. Dace every week. In any case, what I noticed a year ago from Mr. Dace and from their crowd is up until the Ohio State game, let's be fair, Mark, he was on very thin ice. He was. And we may be looking at a situation where the last 2 games helped him keep his job, to be in fairness. And, I agree. They hired a coach where it was kind of on-the-job training. They kind of liked the job he did, during the Harbaugh suspension. And I think the thing about it is the way Harbaugh left the program it wasn't, because I mean, a lot of players, a lot of staff, a lot of people were gone after that 23 team because they went on their all-in year that year. And the other thing about Moore, I think what you're finding right now is he's the trials and tribulations of building a program. You know what I mean? I had said that I didn't know about this OC they hired, who actually was at North Carolina under Mac Brown. And if you look at it, he came in 23 when May was the quarterback. May statistically put up worse numbers in 23 than he did in 2022 with him as the OC, if you go back and take a look at it. Now, that may have been the loss due to some personnel, but, where's the track record of this OC being, a really good quarterback developer or a really good play caller? So I would throw that into the equation. And, I tend to agree with you. I think that it's tough to throw a coach in there and let it be trial and error. Now, listen, we've paid our dues against this team. We had no business losing that game a year ago, and he probably kept his job because of it. And it was poor coaching by our staff that probably allowed him to keep that job. So I'll own up on that. I called Mark's show the next day, and I made some assertions about a certain coach that I've learned to regret, and a 12-team playoff kind of helped that cause, though. But nevertheless, but yeah, I think he's in over his head to a certain extent. I thought that a year ago. I still feel that to this day, and I think they're caught in between offensively. I think they don't know whether they want to be a power team, run team, or a wide open, spread about team with Underwood at quarterback. So
it's difficult offensively to be good at everything. And the way Sharon Moore, and I usually watch his weekly news conference because I'm preparing for said appearance on Michigan Podcast every Tuesday. And it seems like he wants them to be good at everything. He's also not, I'm reading into this a little bit, but if you put together the performance of the team, the way it's been structured the last year and a half, and the way he talks about this team, he's a little bit too much of a player's coach. They're all his buddies, and he's patting them on the back all the time. They're all doing great. They're all amazing. They're all coming along. It's just every position group, even the receivers, which is their receiver core is a joke.
It's bad.
Now they got the ball to Andrew Marsh, and that's what I called for last week. I said he's got to touch the ball 5 or 6 times. So they did get him the ball. He had the one big play for 70 yards. But up until that play that was a little too late, and him going for a 2-point conversion, that situation was stupid. But the 70-yard play to Andrew Marsh, they had not completed a 20-yard pass in that game. And if you watch there, and I'm no offensive guru or genius, but I watch 14 hours of football every Saturday and a half for 50 years. Basically, they run no concepts. You would think they don't have a lineup of Jeremiah Smith and Jamison Williams types on their receiver core to just throw the ball to them and have them outfight a defender, that they would run concepts that would get receivers open, have 2 guys clear it out and the guy cut underneath and run a crossing route. They run no passing trees that make any sense, that show that they're developing any kind of concept of a passing game at all.
Oh, I agree with you. That's why I said I thought that with Underwood going up there, I didn't think that they had this great play caller, quarterback whisperer to really get him developed. And on top of that, you're right, Mark, they don't have the skill on the outside to, kind of help his growth either. It's going to be interesting to see because they've got some landmines with Washington at home. And I listened to Dace's post-mortem after that game. Williams is the type of quarterback, because they've got some issues in the secondary. I knew you guys were going to be able to pick on their corners, because if you look at it, Raiola had some success throwing the ball against them in the Nebraska game. Nebraska screwed up a few possessions at the beginning of that game that really cost them. I thought if you guys could throw the ball, if they could throw the ball against them, I thought USC could, and you guys really picked apart that secondary. And on top of that, ran the football really well too. But you like your chances at Notre Dame? What do you think of ND this week, Matt? Just in final thought.
My first thought is, this line opened at Notre Dame -9. Wow. That was an eye grabber. That, and like Would I lean toward Notre Dame winning the game outright? Yes.
Yeah,
But
I would too.
9 points. And, here's the thing. Boise State's not good, and NC State is terrible. Like, I think the market seemed to be reading into Notre Dame, trashing those teams. Hey, credit Notre Dame for doing what it's supposed to do. But those are not uniquely, profoundly impressive wins. That's just Notre Dame doing what it should be doing. Do we know that this Notre Dame defense, which was terrible in September, is going to stand up to USC's skill position talent? I mean, and one of the things that I've been saying at the USC channel, also that I've been writing about at Trojans Wire, this is a story no one nationally, to my mind, is talking about. USC's found its offensive line coach. Zach Hansen, who replaced Josh Henson. Henson's now the offensive coordinator for Purdue under Barry Odom. Zach Hansen has this group playing well. I mentioned earlier, missing 2 starters, and my co-host at USC, Ethan Inman, on our show, mentioned this is without DJ Wingfield, the Purdue transfer. He was ruled ineligible, got shot down in the courts. He was not allowed to play. Many people in and around the USC program felt, you needed Wingfield to really nail the offensive line. So in a sense, USC is without 3 big dogs. 2 playing and then getting hurt, but the third, Wingfield, not ever being able to crack the roster due to logistics and the courts. So, and yet this offensive line is doing well. And I mean, Michigan hangs its hat on the defensive line, and USC's offensive line stood its ground and controlled that game. So with USC's offensive line playing well, as long as that unit holds up against Notre Dame's front 4, man, Notre Dame -9, I don't see how you get there. I don't see how you get there at all. 6.5, maybe, but not 9. I love
7
USC
is 7 is the
9.
second most important betting number in all of sports. Of course, 3 is the first one, so 7. Yeah, that's a key number. And before we let you continue with your next point, just let me throw this in.
Sure.
It'd be interesting to look back on now 3+ seasons under Lincoln Riley to see, once they notched a strong win, which there's few of those. He was 4-11 against ranked teams coming into this game against Michigan. Was he able to get his team back up the next week?
That's true. That's a good point.
Because, they expended a lot of energy, and obviously they focused on that game. And even though it looked easy, that was a sterling performance. Now, can he get his, this has not been a championship level USC team that's just like, all comers, week after week, we're just going to take them on and be consistent. No, the roller coaster has been going on for 2.5 years. We'll see if they kick it in now at Notre Dame. Now, this would be a significant win.
Yeah, this then you start to talk about playoff if you can get this one, Matt. Yeah. Then you can legitimately.
You got to win this one first.
Then you can have a conversation. 100%. Last thought. I think this one, in a word, if I got it at 7.5, I would take you guys, because I do think this could be a 1-possession game. In a word, with this game, points. Carr's playing about as good as anybody right now. Quarterback is playing really well. And even though Notre Dame's not had a dominant run game this year, I still think the Price-Love combination is as good as any backfield in the country. So, but I think your offense, with the way your quarterback is playing and your skill, and I agree, your line's playing solid. And this has got the makings of a 38-35, 38-31 kind of.
Yep. Absolutely. Game should be played in the 30s, I would think.
Yep. Good show, guys. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, David. Good to see you, man.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Well, it was pretty much a 1-caller show, and that's fine. Nobody else wanted to call tonight, but that's fine. David has all sorts of things to say and great questions for Matt and myself.
We touched on a lot.
Matt, what's going on at Trojans Wire?
Yeah, so we're in that middle period where we pivot from Michigan to Notre Dame, and so and lots to talk about with the game itself, with the condition of the rivalry. Is the series going to get extended? Lots of different things to talk about with USC and Notre Dame over at Trojans Wire. It's going to be a very, very interesting week for sure. All
right, folks, you get a look at it right there. Trojans Wire.
And
Matt
we
said
cover the Big Ten. As you can see, we cover the Big Ten since we are a Big Ten school. Lots of Big Ten coaching carousel articles because, I briefly mentioned, Jonathan Smith, he's on really thin ice at Michigan State. It's not just Luke Fickell. Like Spartan fans are fed up with Jonathan Smith after getting crushed by UCLA. And, who's going to fill the Penn State vacancy? And, of course, if Matt Rule does get the Penn State job, that means Nebraska comes open. So lots of moving parts in the Big Ten coaching carousel world, and we're definitely covering that at Trojans Wire.
And what do you make of UCLA's follow-up performance? Because I got to think, on one hand, they fell into this Penn State win to a certain extent. I give them tons of credit considering what they've been through, and that Penn State is a much more talented team and all of that. But obviously, UCLA's got more talent on that roster than what they showed in those 4 horrific games before they played Penn State. And then, this was not them playing a typical top 5 team in the country. This was them playing a very vulnerable and very fragile top 5 team. And so it kind of went their way. And obviously, this was the start of some level of momentum, because Vegas even saw them as a 7+ point underdog at Michigan State. They got to travel the 3 time zones. That's much publicized as being a detriment. And they go out there and just wallop Michigan State, which again is not a great football team, not even a good football team, but still for UCLA, considering what we were watching out of this team just 2 weeks ago, to go out there and win by 4 scores is pretty remarkable.
It is pretty remarkable. I really liked UCLA plus the 8.5 in that game because, I watched Michigan State against USC, covering that game for Trojans Wire. And, Aiden Childs is not good. He's not a good quarterback. He could be good, but right now he is not good. And he overthrew a wide open receiver early in the game, footwork, mechanics. I'm just shocked by how Jonathan Smith is just not able to put it together with Aiden Childs. So, to me, Mark, Michigan State is the only Big Ten team better than Wisconsin. I would put Michigan State at 17. I think Purdue's better than Michigan State. I think Northwestern is better than Michigan State. It's a grim scene, and that's why Spartan fans are, talking about Jonathan Smith's buyout and candidates to replace him. A former Michigan State player, I believe it was Trey Waynes, said, hire James Franklin. If Penn State doesn't want him, we'll take him. We'll at least be a solid program with him. So a lot about UCLA is that, Michigan State was bad, but, this was a body clock game. It was 9 a.m. Pacific, and UCLA just, was able to smoothly go about its business. And, here's an interesting thing to consider just about UCLA for a moment. If you're, first, they need to fire Martin Jarman. They need to get him out of there. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but he acted like a real jerk over the weekend with LA media. And he's taking credit for this resurgence when, of course, he botched the whole thing about the program. So UCLA needs to fire Martin Jarman as AD. But beyond that, UCLA needs to give thought to this plan. I'm not saying it's the best plan, but I am saying it's a plan that needs to be considered. Give Tim Skipper and Jerry Neuheisel, the head coach and offensive coordinator, a 1-year bridge plan. You basically say they're coaching this team in 2026, and that basically becomes an audition for the permanent job. Because UCLA is a cash-poor program, so if you give Neuheisel and Skipper 1 year, and they're both beloved by players, you can achieve some cost savings, and you give some really popular figures in your university a chance to earn the long-term job, and you just put it out there. They didn't get a chance to coach this team from the beginning. They had to do this, 4 weeks in. So maybe you give them 1 full year as an audition, and then you can really reevaluate and save some money and then make a run at a really big fish for 2027. It's just something worth considering about the UCLA job.
All right. We do this show on Monday night here at SG1 Sports at the Voice of College Football. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm live 10 p.m. Eastern time or post game. So we kind of make a judgment call on the level of game we're talking about. Even the likes of Washington and Rutgers has me watching until it's reasonably over, and then we come on live. If we've got a slate of Conference USA games on a Thursday night, we'll be here at 10 p.m. Eastern time. They're not going to push us back to midnight, but a decent Big 10 or Big 12 game on a Friday night, we will watch those games and come on post game. So you just have to play along with us. But again, it's 10 p.m. Eastern time on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, depending on the level of games. We'll be here sometime from 10 p.m. Eastern on to take your calls. And again, Matt's at Trojans Wire, so check out his work. Matt, appreciate you being here as always.
Thanks so much.
We'll catch everybody on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Remember, we've got the Iowa show and the Big Ten show live as well.